Hello students, today's agenda is to check homework. We'll be factoring trinomials and you will be able to do 2.5. Today students will be able to factor trinomials by using greatest common factor when necessary. And so here we have some that will help us define how to factor them. What we're going to be looking is for two numbers that multiply gives us the last term, which is a constant. But when you add those two factors, they will give you the middle term. And we have to pay attention to the signs in here. And you can do it directly in here. We know that for 6, the factors can be 1 times 6. But when you add them, it gives you 7, not 5. Or you can do 2 times 3, it's 6. But when you add them, it equals positive 5. Something else that can help us is the diamond. And so what you're going to do with the diamond is put the last number on top, the middle coefficient at the bottom. And again, this is for multiplication, and this you need to add those two factors. Or again, you can just do it directly here. So 2 times 3 is 6, 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 times 3. Those are the factors that we need, and those will help us come up with our factors. So we're just going to take the square root of the first term. It's x squared, so it's going to be x. We write it right there. And plus 2 plus 3. Now that's all you have to do. Just find those factors, okay? But if you want to do a quick check to make sure that you have the right factors, what you can do is here. Remember that this x times x is the x squared, and then the last two terms is 2 and 3, so 2 times 3 is 6. But for the middle term, we multiply 2 times x is 2x, and x times 3 is 3x. And I call it the happy face because if you have in here, you have a smile, 2x and 3x make the 5x, and notice how it's the mouth with the nose. In Spanish, we say, carita feliz hace la nariz. Happy face makes the nose, okay? And again, it's just a quick check. You can even do it mentally. 2 times x is 2x, and 3x is 5x. For number 2, again, you can just find the two factors. 2 times 3 is 6. But when you add them equals negative 5, well, then that means that they have to be negative 2 times negative 3. The positive 6 goes on top. The negative 5 goes at the bottom. And so my two factors will be negative 2 times negative 3. Negative times negative is positive. And negative plus negative is negative or more negative. Okay? And it's negative 5. You just open your parentheses and you get x minus 2, x minus 3. It doesn't matter if you put the negative 2 in here and the negative 3 in here. You will get the same answer. And that's all you have to do. Just factor the trinomials. But again, you can just do a quick check. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. And negative 2x and negative 3x gives us the negative 5x. Now, something that I want you to notice with this too is that the last term is positive. For here, we will have negative, but with that, it tells me two things. I added these two together, 2x plus 3x is the 5x. Okay, so that's one thing that I can see, that this tells me that I'm going to add the two factors that I find. The other thing that it tells me is that when this is positive, both of these will have the sign of the bottom. See? This is positive, this is positive. The two factors have the signs of the middle term. Again, two things. If the last term is positive, you will add them, and you will have for both factors the sign of the middle. Negative, both are negative. Positive, both are positive. Now let's see what happens when we have a negative for the last term. In here again, you can do it directly. What are factors to make negative 6? Well, first of all, we know that we need 1 and 1. To make it negative, you have to have 1 positive and 1 negative. And that also means when you're adding that you will always subtract. When you have a positive and a negative, we subtract and leave the greater sign. So to get 5, we cannot do 2 times 3 and then 3 minus 2 equals 5. No, it's 1 times 6. But one of them has to be negative. Okay? The other thing that we need to pay attention is that when this is negative, the middle term tells me the sign of the greater one. So positive 6 and negative 1. Okay, the tiny one will be negative because we get the greater sign. Okay, let's do it in the diamond. So negative 6, positive 5. Again, we're looking for a number that multiply equals negative 6, but when we subtract them, now we're not going to add them, we're going to subtract them, and it's going to be positive 5. Again, it's 6 and negative 1, because the greater one will have the sign of the middle term, or the one in the below. We open our parentheses, xx minus 1 plus 6. Again, a quick check. Negative 1 times x is negative x. X times 6 is 6x. And because we have a positive and a negative, we subtract and leave the greater sign. 6x minus x is 5x. So what does this tell me? That this will tell me that we have 1 positive and 1 negative, but also that we're going to subtract. And the third thing that it tells me is that the biggest factor will be this sign. The same for this one. Because the last one is negative, negative tells me that we have 1 positive and 1 negative, that the greater one will have this sign, and that we're going to subtract them when we find those factors. Again, it cannot be 2 times 3, because when we subtract, 3 minus 2 is 1, not 5. So the other possibility is a 1 and a 6. Again, this tells me the sign of the biggest factor. Okay? And we open our parentheses. Xx plus 1 minus 6. Doesn't matter where you put them. You could put x minus 6, x plus 1. As long as you keep the sign with the correct one. Okay? A quick check. 1 times x is x. X times negative 6 is negative 6x. When we subtract, it's 6 minus 1 is 5, but keep the greater sign, which is negative, and that's why you'll have negative 5x. So this gives you the nose. Carita feliz, hace la nariz. So a recap for that. Whenever the last is a positive, both signs will have the sign of the middle term, right? On the top we put the last, in the bottom we put the middle coefficient. So if the last one is positive and the middle term is positive, both are positive. If the last one is positive but the middle term is negative, both are negative. If the top is negative, we're going to have 1 and 1, but this tells me the sign of the biggest one. The last one is negative. We're going to have 1 and 1, but this tells me the sign of the biggest one. Okay, but it's 1 and 1. 1 is positive and 1 is negative. And so this is something that you can write down to guide you. Remember that this is the last term and this is the middle coefficient. And the fact that 1 is positive and 1 is negative, that means that we're going to end up subtracting. And sometimes knowing this helps us. Okay, subtracting while on the top we have to add them because it's the same sign. Okay, we're going to add the two factors that we find. Okay, let's put that diamond into practice. And so in here, again, you can just do it directly in here. We know that 1 times 7 is 7. And when we add them, this tells me that I'm going to add them. It's equals to 8. Or you can use the diamond. We put the last term on top, the 8 at the bottom. And 1 times 7 is 7. 1 plus 7 is 8. We open our parentheses. And we get x plus 1. X plus 7. And again, to check that they are equivalent, we multiply 1 times x is x. X times 7 is 7x. And they, when you add them, 7x plus x do give us 8x. For the next one, again, the last term or the constant will go on top. The middle term will be at the bottom. What two numbers multiply equals 2, but when added equals -3? Again, this tells me that both of them will be negative. Whenever you have a positive at the end, both will have this sign. And so both are going to be negative because this is positive. And 1 times 2 is 2, but when you add -1 and -2, gives us -3. We open our parentheses, x minus 1, x minus 2, and a quick check. -1 times x is -x. X times -2 is -2x. Together make the -3x. This quick check will help you to make sure that they are indeed equivalent to each other. So these are my solutions, my factors. Now I have -8 and -2. This tells me that I'm going to subtract them, that we have 1 and 1, one positive and one negative, and this is the greatest number. So the smallest will be positive. And what two numbers multiplied equals -8, but when you subtract them equals 2? Well, it's 4 times 8. Well, it's 4 times 2. And the 4 is the biggest, so we leave it with this sign. 4 times 2. So -4 times +2 is -8. But when we subtract, right, subtract them, this means subtract them, it's negative, 4 minus 2 is 2, with the greatest sign gives us that. So it's x minus 4, x plus 2, but let's check fast. -4 times x is -4x, x times 2 is 2x. Well, if I owe for x, but I have 2x, that's -2. I still owe 2 more. For number 8, -12 goes here. That means I'm going to be subtracting, that I'm going to have a positive and a negative, and that this sign tells me the sign of the biggest one, so the smallest one will be negative. What two numbers multiply equals -12, but when you subtract them, right, this tells me that I'm going to subtract them, equals 1. Well, it's 3 times 4, but the positive goes with the biggest number. 3 times 4, so it's -3 times 4 is -12. 4 minus 3 is 1. So it's x plus 4 and x minus 3. We multiply 4 times x is 4x. X times -3 is -3x. And when we subtract them, 4x minus 3x is +1x. And so the diamond can be used only when the leading coefficient is 1, when there is no A, B, and C. We don't have A in here. So When we have that, we can check first to see if we have a greatest common factor. Okay, so the greatest common factor in here will be 2 goes into all three of them. And for x, if there is x in all of the terms, that means that we can include x in here. We check which one has the smallest exponent, and I noticed that this one that doesn't have anything has the smallest one, so that will be the one that we're going to use. Remember, what is the biggest number that goes into all the coefficients? And for the variables, only if it's in all of them, we get the one with the smallest exponent. 2x cubed divided by 2x is x squared. Negative divided by positive is negative. 2x squared divided by 2x is x. And negative divided by positive is negative. 24 divided by 2 is 12. And x divided by x is 1. 1 times 12 is 12. Now that we have 1 as a coefficient, we can use this to use it in our diamond. So negative 12 is the last term. Negative 1 is the coefficient of the middle term. And so what are two numbers that multiply equals negative 12, but when subtracted equals negative 1? This tells me the sign of the biggest one. So it was going to be negative 4 times positive 3. So similar to the one that we have here, but the biggest sign was positive. Now the biggest sign is negative. We are going to bring down our greatest common factor and open the two parentheses here. And we put x minus 4, x plus 3, and those will be our factors. Again, if assuming that this is correct, that you got the correct greatest common factor, when we do our happy face, now it's going to be the nose for this one, okay? Just the inside. But you can then multiply that times your greatest common factor, and it should come up to be exactly the same thing like that. Okay, so negative 4 times x is negative 4x. X times 3 is 3x. And if you notice, negative 4x and positive 3x is negative x. So that means that we have x times x is x squared. And this is the negative 4x and 3x is negative x. And negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Now I bring down the greatest common factor. I'm just still checking. And I use distributive property. 2x times x squared is 2x cubed. Yay! 2x times negative x is negative 2x squared. That's it. And 2x times negative 12 is negative 24x. So we do have the same, and so that means that they are equivalent, that we factor correctly. Okay, for the next one, I noticed that the biggest number that can go into 5, negative 20, and 15 is 5. I see that these have x, but this one doesn't. I see that the first two terms have x, but this one doesn't. So the greatest common factor is just f. It's just 5. And I start dividing. 5x squared divided by 5 is x squared. Negative 20x divided by 5 is negative 4x. Now, if you get confused, first divide the signs. Negative divided by positive is negative. 20 then the numbers. 20 divided by 5 is 4. And finally, the variables. X, and we don't have any x in here, so you just bring it down. So you're just going to bring it down. The last one, positive divided by positive is positive. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Now we have a leading coefficient of 1, so we can put the 3 in here, the negative 4 in here. So whenever this is positive, both of these will be the sign of the bottom one, okay? If this was negative, then 1 and 1. But when it's positive, both will have the sign at the bottom. And so negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3, but when we add them, negative 1 and negative 3 is negative 4. We bring down our greatest common factor, open our parentheses, and we have x minus 1, x minus 3. Again, if you want to do or check the happy face, -1 times x is negative x. X times -3 is -3x. And together is -4x. Okay, those are our factors. Okay, for the last one, the greatest common factor for the numbers or coefficients will be 3. For the variable, now we have on all of them, so we're going to get the one with the smallest exponent for the GCF. And we start dividing. 3x cubed divided by 3x is x squared. Negative divided by positive is negative, and then 15 divided by 3 is 5. X squared divided by x is x. Negative divided by positive is negative. 42 divided by 3 is 14. And x divided by x is 1, but we don't put it. Now we can have that in here. -5 right here. And what are two factors that when multiply equals negative? Well, one is going to be negative because of this one. And positive, one tiny positive. Two numbers that multiply equals -14, but when subtracted equals -5. So it's going to be -7 and 2. When we subtract them, 7 minus 2 is 5 and get the greater sign. So now we bring down the greatest common factor, open our parentheses, and we put x minus 7, x plus 2. These are our factors. And you can do a quick check with the middle term to make sure that you have the right one. -7 times x is -7x. X times 2 is 2x. And when we subtract them, -7x plus 2x is -5x. So let's recap for the negatives. When the last term is negative, you will have 1 and 1. You will have to subtract them. And this tells me the sign of the biggest one. Okay? With this, we end our lesson. If you can please give us a thumbs up, subscribe around here. This will be the link to the entire unit. And here you will find the next lesson. Now you're able to do 2.5 and have fun.